Good afternoon. My name is Jason Chavez, and I'm the chair of the Committee of the Whole. I'm going to call to order our regular committee meeting for Tuesday, February 20. Councilmembers Ellison, Koski, Chowdhury, and Palmisano will not be present in committee today and reached out ahead of time to inform their absence. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll to verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Wansley.
Present.
Rainville.
Present.
Vita.
Present.
Ellison is absent. Osmond.
Present.
Cashman.
Present.
Jenkins.
Present.
Chugtai. Present. Koski is absent. Palmisano is absent. Chowdhury. Absent. Chair Chavez.
Present.
There are 9 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We have 5 items on our agenda today, in addition to reports of committees that have met this cycle. Items number 3, 4, and 5 will be for our settlement agreement and consent decree oversight committee, and I will turn that meeting over to subcommittee's chair, President Payne, for that portion of the meeting. Agenda items number 1 and number 2 are related, so I suggest we begin with item number 2, which is the report and analysis of municipal policies related to the use of resident ballot initiatives. I will invite the city auditor, Ryan Patrick, to give that presentation on that item.
And council members. Is the mic not on? Okay. Today I'm filling in for Andrew Hawkins, who wrote this report. He and I discussed it, walked through a very brief slideshow, attempt to answer questions, but again, I'm not the author of the report, so I'll do my very best. So we were asked to look into similar cities, cities that are situated like ours, who either do or don't have resident ballot initiatives. And just for a kind of higher level overview, ballot measures are the citizens' process by which they can affect laws, charters, municipal codes. It's a direct means of action for private citizens to come together with their community to make change. This is kind of your Webster's dictionary definition of the process that comes from the National Conference of State Legislatures, and you can see in roughly half of states have some form of this process in them. So initiatives and referendums are 2 different things. The first, initiatives, they're the front end process. So if you're looking to add something, that would be the initiative process for proposed changes. Referendums serve a similar function, but more of the back end process. You're looking to change or remove something. But those are two different processes. We did a statewide review, specifically selected 5 cities, and I'll refer you to the table on page 5 of the report for the actual full details. I'm only presenting this at a very high level. 5 cities: St. Paul, Rochester, Bloomington, Brooklyn Park, and Duluth. Rochester didn't have these features, but again, they're a mayor council system with the city council. So we wanted to look at that. Some common features we saw, and again, I would refer you to the report to see these in more detail. They all have a signature percentage requirement that range from 8 to 20%. Duluth is somewhat unique in that it has a different process when the kind of vote percentage, so the percentage of voters who sign the petition is above 10% but below 20%. So they have a separate process that kind of triggers a higher level of action. All of them require or allow council to approve or enact the proposal prior to it being sent for a vote to the people. So council can prospectively agree with the voter initiative, add it to the code or charter, and then a vote isn't necessary. So they have varying time ranges and how long they have to do that, or when they fail to adopt, when it would go to a ballot for the voters. Common features in referendums, very similar. So they require a signature requirement, and then again, since we're talking not about adding, but more of a removing on the back end process, again, council has an opportunity to take the action itself before the ballot is triggered, either a special election or on the next municipal election, depending on the circumstances. So very similar, but different processes, different outcomes. Largely the signature requirements are the same, between 8 and 15, 20%. That is it. I refer you to the report. It contains the chart. I think this is the best place to see the high level overview is page 5 and 6 of the report, have that high level chart. Contains the city specific information for each of the cities I discussed.
Thank you for that presentation, City Auditor Ryan Patrick. Members, if you have questions or comments, please fill in the queue. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Thank you, City Auditor. I just had a question in regards to how many home rule charter cities in Minnesota allow ballot initiatives versus or via petition?
Councilmember Wansley, I will refer that question to Mr. Hawkins to bring back to the full council. I don't have the answer for that off the top of my head. My apologies.
Well, I'll just share the other question that you probably have to bring back to him too. Also thinking of what are some of the historical dynamics that has led to Minneapolis not having ballot referendums or initiatives in comparison to other cities across Minnesota with home rule charters. So I'll also follow up with you via email with these questions too.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll direct the clerk to file that report. We can now turn to item number 1, which is referring to staff the subject matter of an ordinance relating to elections, adding a new section to provide for initiative and referendum. This item is on a tight timeline due to the need to get it to the Charter Commission for consideration for it to have a chance to be on the ballot this November. For that reason, I'm going to move to set a public hearing at our next COW meeting on Monday, March 4th. Is there any discussion on this item? Councilor Wansley, is that you still on queue? Seeing none, the motion for a public hearing on March 4th is before us. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vita.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chugtai.
Aye.
Chowdhury. Chavez.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes.
That carries, and that item is approved for a public hearing. Our next 3 items are part of our settlement agreement and consent decree oversight committee. So I will now turn that meeting over to President Payne as the chair of that committee.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. The items that we're going to be reviewing are a contract with Storm Training Group LLC for services related to training police department academy recruits and use of force and de-escalation techniques in accordance with implementing the court enforceable settlement agreement, and a contract with Storm Training Group LLC for services related to police department training and use of force and de-escalation. They're very similar actual contracts. And we have Commander Chris Brown available review by MDHR, or we don't have our independent evaluators quite yet, but
Yeah.
I'm
So-
guessing they'll be involved as well.
Yes, Council President. So the process up to this point was identifying a company that and throwing out the company and saying these are the to the MDHR and showing them what this company is capable of producing based on those resources, and MDHR said they can work with them basically, and as well as hitting the other end of it, which is hitting up Storm and saying, can you guys see what the requirements are, and can you do it? So up until now, without having a contract, you don't get so in order to do a 24-hour course, the lesson planning and curriculum takes like about 1,000 hours of curriculum writing in order to come up with 24 hours straight of training. So we need a contract in place in order to start building that lesson plan. And so prior to now, there's only been a talk about what it is we would do and giving just a very basic plan, and it's all going to be following what the MDHR settlement grants requires, as well as some of the other elements of what we need, which we're going beyond the settlement agreement plans to try to, because this is about changing the whole culture of things, so it's very much more robust than that. But once we have the contract in place, then the curriculum writing and the lesson plans actually goes into place. So prior to that, right now, that is the stuff, the lesson plans and the curriculum, that's the stuff that'll go through the scrutiny of the MDHR as well as the monitor once they're in place. So whatever lesson plans they come up with for that will still go under the scrutiny of the MDHR as well as the monitor for approval.
Thank you. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Council President Payne. My question is related to whether or not the supports from these contractors can be extended to other commissions. I'm speaking in regards to the most recent CCPO meeting, where there was discussion about how several of the commissioners have been unable to get their use of force training through MPD. And last week, I believe they made a formal request for MPD leadership to come to their next meeting to explain the reason for the delay. And for context and for this body and the public, commissioners sitting on the CCPO are unable to sit on review panels to make recommendations on potential police misconduct until they complete these training sessions on use of force and many others. And one commissioner has stated that she had tried to receive this training for months with little response from MPD on a timeline of when it would be made accessible and available. So now that we are looking at approving these contracts, it seems like we shouldn't have a delay in extending this to commissioners sitting on the CCPO, and shouldn't have to wait for MPD to be able to provide this to them. So is there a possibility for CCPO commissioners to engage in these trainings as soon as they become available?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Councilmember Wansley. That decision is not actually up to me to be able to authorize people sitting in the training. However, if that's what the chief and the mayor's wants, then I'm sure that'll definitely be available. As it comes to today, is the contract is needed in order to establish the contract so that the people can work and their curriculum can be made. After that, the actual training is slated for September 9th through December 19th. So there's a lot of time we can have that dialogue, and I can hopefully be able to speak better to that later.
Well, it would be important if you all are shaping the curriculum at this point to think through what would be needed for commissioners going through CCPO if they are able to be looped into the services provided by this contractor. So what I will do is follow up with council leadership. Hopefully you all can follow up then with Chief O'Hara and the mayor's city leadership around seeing if this can be made available to our CCPO commissioners, because again, that's delaying work or advancement around recommendations for police misconduct that is also mandated in the MDHR settlement. So if we have a resource right here that we're approving that can, streamline that process, it would be great to have the ability to feed two birds with one seed. So we'll follow up with you all via email on this, and hopefully we can get to a resolution.
Can I speak one more thing, Councilmember Wansley? When the curriculum gets written and such, it is very much following the settlement requirements, but there are other elements and other trainings within this, in the settlement agreement that specifically address training around police misconduct. So that could be just a further conversation, not just specific to the use of force, but there are other ones that probably touch on it more. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I'm just going by what was recommended or requested by CCPO. They need trainings on use of force, and that's what they specifically asked MPD to provide to them, and for some reason that has not happened. So now that you all are looking to contract with the vendor to provide that, saying can they also be looped into those same services, since they're also mandated of needing that training too. So either way, it seems like there can be a place where we can get an answer to this.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you for that question, and I'll ask the clerks to document that for a formal follow-up from the administration. Any other discussion on items 3 and 4? Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne. I have heard from folks on the CCPO, or I can't never remember, CCPO, about that training, the use of force training, and I'm just wondering, is this contract the same? Is it with the same company that's provided the use of force training for the other members? Because I think there's like 6 members who have received the training already, and I would caution like bringing in something different. Like just because MPD does this, is this a fit for that group when there has already been a group of 6 that have received the training? Doing something different might not be the way to go with this training. So I'm just wondering if we know, like, is this the same company? Is this the same training? I think I saw in the meeting last week that 6 members have already received use of force training, and they're able to review, do the case reviews. Councilmember Payne, do you know if there's, if this is something different in this contract?
I don't have knowledge of that personally, but I think we should follow up with the administration on that.
Okay.
I'll call on the city attorney to perhaps be able to answer that question.
Somewhat. Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Vita. So it is the case that some of the members have been trained on use of force. There have been panels that have occurred in terms of training the other folks. This contract is to develop training. The training development, it's going to take a while. So I'm not sure that this contract is actually the best way to get the CCPO members trained more quickly. But my implementation team can work closely with MPD and make sure that the members who haven't gotten trained yet are getting the training that they need.
Councilmember Wansley?
Yeah, thank you. So just providing clarification on my question, and thank you, CAO, for providing a little bit more context. So again, at the meeting last week, CCPO members requested MPD to come forward and give an explanation of why they haven't been able to provide this training to them so that they can fulfill this requirement of training on use of force. That is the premise of this question. And as of now, I don't know why CAO or the chief of police of MPD, why some of those members who have requested for MPD to do this training, why that has not come into fruition. So it seems like, yes, there's going to have to be follow-up. And if MPD is not the venue for getting those members this training that they have repeatedly asked for, so much so they took a vote on it last week, if we have a resource right here, is there a possibility for that to fulfill that too? So it seems like, again, city council leadership will be in conversations with you, CAO, along with the mayor and the chief of police to figure out how we can reconcile getting those members trained.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councilmember Wansley. Councilmember Jenkins?
Thank you, Chair Payne. And I guess now I'm not clear. Does MPD provide training, or do we contract with organizations like Storm and others?
So, Councilmember Jenkins, yes, ma'am. The MPD does do the training. This would be done in a co-teaching way. That way, with our resources that we have right now, any shift we may have the numbers of officers that are on each shift working any given day might be, if we're lucky, 8 officers working any particular shift. Normally, in previous years when our staffing wasn't in the position it is right now, we were able to take part-time officers and pull them from the streets to help instruct. In this particular case, with the contract that we have written here, it allows us to keep more officers answering 911 calls on the street and using some of the contracted people. So this is it is using an outside vendor to help assist with the having a number of instructors, but we're doing it in a co-teaching model so that 2 of our own officers, we've committed to making sure that we have 2 officers of our own that are there, so that for continuity, as well as ensuring that in the future, as our numbers do rise, we're able to take over that and own it ourselves. But like I said earlier, the company that Storm, there are numerous part-time instructors we currently have who are certified with Storm already.
So potentially, it sounds like our staffing shortages may be leading to delays in people getting trained.
Yeah, Councilmember Jenkins, that is accurate. It's not to just this level for just this training. It's not unique.
Yeah.
All of our
I
training,
mean, across the board, probably.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. There are settlement agreement trainings that if we were staffed and we had more appropriate staff and we're sitting at the numbers we are, we would be able to fulfill more of the settlement agreements because we could have more officers staying on the streets in order to fulfill that. But this is, yeah, sorry, it's a tough conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Jenkins. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne. I just want to, for the public record, clarify that these are 2 different trainings. What is before us is not, and I see the city attorney shaking her head. This is not the same training. What's before us is not what the CCPO has received. That is something very different. And yes, there are only 6 members who got the training due to scheduling conflicts, and we have to work to make sure that all of our commissioners are provided the training. But this is 2 different things. What's before us and what they need are 2 different things, and I don't think it's okay for us to publicly keep talking about this like it's one thing and like the expectations are for MPD to do something because they have contracts with outside organizations. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is we have this before us and they need training, which would come from something different.
Councilmember Wansley.
Question for CAO. Is there, as we just heard the commander mention, that there is a possibility for redesigning this curriculum that will guide their use of force training? Is there anything that prohibits the same vendor from providing a use of force training to CCPO officers? I'm sorry, commissioners.
Council President, Councilmember Wansley, I mean, I haven't looked at the contract, but I would think that we could make the training available for, any city, whether it be officers or it be CCO members. I don't think that there would be any prohibition to having the CPO members sit in on the training that will ultimately be developed by Storm. My issue is more like it's going to take a while to develop that training because it's got to go through MDHR review. I mean, it's got to be written. It's got to go through MDHR review, through independent evaluator review, and what I'm hearing, the need for CCPO members is a much more immediate training and probably not of the same, breadth and depth and practical, scenarios and things like that a police officer would need. So, what I would like to do is try to figure out a way that we can get the CCPO members the training that they would need, more quickly and to enable them to be effective on the panels.
And just quickly, who has been able to provide that training thus far to, I believe Councilmember Vital has referenced 6 members who've provided that so far?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, so again, right now, there's a gap. It sounds like no one is providing that training, as you highlighted. There's an immediate need, has been. So again, regardless if it's through this venue or there needs to be someone providing this training in the intermediate, and that has not happened. So much so, CCPO have made a request asking why. So good to hear there's nothing that's stopping this contract from also potentially fulfilling that need, and also hearing that we don't even know who has provided training to the 6 commissioners as well. So there's lots of things to follow up on in regards to this.
And just council member, I don't, Kristen Anderson doesn't know, that doesn't mean no one knows.
Okay, yeah, we'll follow up on that.
Sometimes you're just wrong.
No.
So we will be formally requesting a follow-up from the administration on the question of CCPO training, what's the current curriculum for that and capacity to deliver that training, and a formal follow-up on whether or not we can utilize STORM as a technical assistance provider for developing training specifically for CCPO as an those are 2 separate questions that we should have follow-ups on.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Councilmember Wansley. Any other discussion on these items? Without objection, I'm going to recommend we vote on both items 3 and 4 together. Any objection to that? Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vital.
Aye.
Osmond.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chugtai.
Aye.
Chavez.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes.
That motion carries, and that item will be forwarded for approval. Finally, on our subcommittee agenda, we have item number 5, which is referring to staff the subject matter of an ordinance amending, altering, and adding provisions related to the police department and its duty structure and oversight. I'll give some more context to this since I'm the author. We had some changes at the state legislature around civilian oversight that happened after we passed our CCPO ordinance. These changes allow us to actually strengthen civilian oversight. Some of the scope of what a civilian oversight body could do was restricted by state statute prior to the last legislative session. And it's my intention that we implement some of those stronger measures within our local ordinance around CCPO. There's some additional strengths and options that have been provided in the legislation that may or may not run headlong into the MDHR settlement agreement and what is required of us to deliver on that. And additionally, there are some direct feedback that we've had from some CCPO commissioners about what's working and not working under the current structure of CCPO. So my intention is to have a very narrow focus around implementing the stronger capacity that was passed in legislation. But there is going to be some opportunity to hear feedback from some of the CCPO commissioners, and we just need to make sure that we're working closely with our city attorneys so that we're not in conflict with the settlement agreement. Is there any discussion on that item? Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, can you say more about the measures that were passed at the state?
Yes, so under section 626.89, subdivision 17, specifically related to civilian review authorities, it used to be that review boards, commissions, or other oversight bodies shall not have the authority to make findings of fact or determination. Under the last legislative session, that was stricken through and now has provided the opportunity to make findings of fact or determination regarding a complaint. The state statute's been updated to also provide the authority to do more rigorous investigation. That component could conflict with the settlement agreement. And so we will be working closely with the attorney's office to make sure that we don't run afoul of the settlement agreement while implementing some of the stronger language that was passed at the state.
So are we taking action on this today? Or
This is a referral to staff.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vita.
Aye.
Osmond.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins. Chugtai.
Aye.
Chair Chavez.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes.
That motion carries and that item will be referred to staff. I will now turn the chair back to Councilmember Chavez to chair the remainder of today's meeting.
Thank you, President Payne. Next, we will have reports from standing committees on matters to be considered by the full council this Thursday. We'll begin with the Administration and Enterprise Oversight Chair, Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. The AO Committee is bringing forward 16 items for approval. The first is passage of resolution for a gift acceptance from the Federal Emergency Management Agency of travel expenses. Number 2 is approving a migrant crisis legislative directive, and I will provide additional context on a change that's happening or has happened to that item after I get done. Number 3 is accepting bid for Pioneers and Soldiers Memorial Cemetery Masonry Pier Repair Project. Number 4 is accepting bid for Hennepin Ave South Reconstruction Project. Number 5 is authorizing a contract with Willen Associates for National Incident Management System Reset Training Maintenance. 6 is authorizing a contract with One Neck IT Solutions, LLC, for providing outsourced IT services. Number 7 is authorizing contracts with various vendors for loan administration of the Minneapolis Homes Access Down Payment Assistance Program. 8 is authorizing master contract amendment with the Division of Indian Work for the continued provision of health and human services. 9 is authorizing a master contract amendment with the Center for Energy and Environment for Environmental Services. 10 is authorizing a contract amendment for the video surveillance upgrade project at the Convention Center. 11 is authorizing a contract amendment with CoStar Realty Information, Inc. for access to real estate information database. 12 is a contract amendment for yard maintenance services. 13 is approving a legal settlement with Brett Hay v. City of Minneapolis. 14 is approving a legal settlement with Anthony Watson v. City of Minneapolis, John Vick, and Mark Dahl. Number 15 is approving a legal settlement. Brittany Jalen Rodriguez v. Widler Heating and Cooling, Inc., and Sean David West and Minneapolis Bicycle Coalition v. Oscar Romero. 16 is authorizing contract amendments with organizations providing services under the Minneapolis Strategic Outreach Initiative and a related legislative directive. And with that, I will provide or move all items for approval, but also want to give some context on number 2.
Go ahead, Councilmember Wansley.
Awesome. So for number 2, I would like to note that while the content of the legislative directive has not changed, I have made a technical change to the title of the legislative directive, which now states support for displaced populations. Originally, when I submitted this legislative directive, my office sought out advice from community advocates on a better title. And since then, we've received a lot of feedback, specifically that being that the term migrant crisis is often used by popular media to describe people fleeing and crossing borders. It's often accompanied by images of families stuck in limbo under inhumane conditions or dying on the way to seeking safety. And these are people, fellow humans that are fleeing or have fled persecution, civil conflict, war, natural disasters, or other climate change, exacerbated natural disasters, or even economic hardships. And many of those things often go hand in hand with each other. And what the popular media doesn't address are the root causes of why displacement happens all while also casting these same people as the problem in the crisis. So we really want to make sure the language and the messaging of this legislative directive is reflective of, those dynamics and being sensitive to those dynamics. So that is why there's a change to that title. And with that, I will move those items for approval or stand for any questions.
Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I just had a question about the Minneapolis contracts. I brought up some concerns I had during the committee meeting, but I just wanted some clarity for the public record. In what was said was that in order to fulfill those contracts that weren't paid out for 2023, we're approving contract extensions for 2024. So this question is probably for Councilmember Wansley. I'm trying to understand, are we double paying for the 2023 contract now that we're putting contract extensions in? Because the contract extensions are to go through 2024, and it was my understanding that the money that they did not receive was the 2023 contract that had also been extended by Councilmember Chavez, I think for $1.7 million until the end of December. So I'm trying to get some clarity on, are we paying them again for 2023, or are we paying them, is this contract extension we're voting on for 2024?
So we had a pretty comprehensive presentation on this from Director Nelson Brown, where she gave pretty in-depth context on what we're voting on today. In terms of, these are contract amendments reflecting services that were rendered but that had not been paid with a number of different contractors under our Minneapolis project. So I'm not sure in terms of if there's particular things in the RCA that's raising confusion about the time span of when these services were provided or not. But what I do know, again, we are asking for approval to pay for services that were rendered. And that's what Director Nelson brought forward to the committee, and that is what we're recommending approval of.
Councilmember Vita.
I understand what we're asking for in approval. It's a contract extension through 2024. Maybe the city attorney can clarify for me. I don't understand how this extension is linked to payments that we didn't make to these groups in 2023.
Thank you, Councilmember Vita. If we have city staff from the Office of Community Safety, I feel like if they're present today, they may be able to speak to that question. If not, I'll pass it to the city attorney.
And Chair Chavez, Councilmember Vita, I'm sorry, I don't have enough familiarity with this to be able to answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. If the clerks can note that question, we'll get an answer for you, Councilmember Vita. Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. I wonder if Councilmember Wansley could explain why the contracts were not paid in 2023. Is there some issue with performance or paperwork or something like that?
Thank you, Councilmember Rainville. So again, Director Nelson Brown did a pretty elaborate presentation for AO, where it was raised to council members that there had been a number of vendors who had not been paid for services provided. And this was relayed to Neighborhood Safety Department along with Commissioner Barnett. And they worked with our appropriate city departments to get these moved through the appropriate financial channels so that those services could be paid for and compensated. That is something, again, more than happy to follow up on. That's what the legislative directive also aims to do, to get some follow up on how do we continue to have these systemic issues around management of invoices within NSD, and hoping that we can reconcile that going forward.
Okay, so that was a long answer. What I'm hearing you say is it's our problem at the city. It's not the fact that the paperwork wasn't submitted or the work wasn't done, there wasn't documentation of work. Where does the problem lie, please?
So if you look on LIMS in the correspondence between my office and the Office of Community Safety around this, it named that there are staffing challenges that have made it pretty challenging for NSD to complete invoices. And that is something that has been flagged by a number of leaders within the enterprise. And that is something that hopefully this body has tried to reconcile and that we will reconcile. So there is a staffing issue that led us to this point. But regardless, these services were provided. NSD recommends that there needed to be payment made on those services, and that's reflected in the contracts that we're approving today.
And as I said earlier, we'll try to get answers from the Office of Community Safety. They are the ones that did submit these items for approval. So the questions, I appreciate Councilmember Walensky answer these questions, but they're better directed at the Office of Community Safety. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you. I agree with that, Chair Chavez. We need to have staff here to answer these questions because it was my understanding that these invoices didn't get paid because the groups didn't provide the proper documentation to receive the payment, that there had been a change in reporting that the new director was expecting from these groups, and that didn't happen, so the payment was held until the proper documentation was provided to Director Nelson Brown for payment. So I would love for you, Chair Chavez, to have staff on the public record tell this council and the people in Minneapolis what actually happened to why these invoices weren't paid out. Again, I still need to understand what are we actually paying here for what year. That part is important to me too. But I just know that I was told it wasn't paid out because they didn't provide the proper documentation and not all this other stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vita. And I've been told by some of these groups in my own ward for different reasons too. So I think it's important that we get clarity from the Office of Community Safety in making sure we're paying these invoices. Okay, we'll move on. There seems to be nobody else on queue. I'll pass it on to the Budget Committee, chaired by the Council Vice President, Chuck Tai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Budget Committee is bringing forward 3 items for approval to this week's council meeting. The first is confirming a mayoral appointment to the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee. Item number 2 is approving the 2024-2025 Budget Committee Work Plan. And item number 3 is legislative directive staff directive to the legislative department staff to develop a proposed 2025-2026 legislative department biennial budget and to complete a review of the city's financial policies. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Council Vice President. There seems to be no questions. I'll go on to the Business, Housing, and Zoning Committee, chaired by Councilmember Osman.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. The BIS committee is bringing forward 11 items. The first 3 items are license for Picnic, Tokidoki, and Giacchino's Pizza. Item 4 is the reappointment of Joseph Campbell to the Planning Commission. Item 5 is 2 reappointments and 1 new appointment to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Item 6 is liquor license approval. Item 7 is liquor license renewal. Item 8 is gambling license. Item 9 is confirming the appointment of Alfred Port to the Family Housing Fund Board. And item 10 is accepting 3 Met Council grants. Item 11 is authorizing several great street grant agreement. I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Osman. There doesn't seem to be any questions. I'll go on to the Climate and Infrastructure Committee, chaired by Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. The Climate and Infrastructure Committee is bringing forward 1 item to this Thursday's council meeting. It's a 2024 alley reconstruction project designation, cost estimate, easements, and setting the public hearing. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. There doesn't seem to be any questions. We'll go on to the Public Health and Safety Committee with the Vice Chair, Councilmember Walensky.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. The PHS committee is bringing forward 4 items. The first is accepting a grant from the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation for rescue kits. Item 2 is approving appointments to the Public Health Advisory Committee. Item 3 is accepting a Justice Assistance Grant for Police Department and Attorney's Office support. And item number 4 is directing the legislative department to report a summary of the current state of child care in Minneapolis. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Wansley. And last, we'll go to the Audit Committee, chaired by President Payne.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. We met for the first time for our audit committee of the year for February 12th. We don't have any items to move forward for full council approval, but I just wanted to share for your for full context. We received a property and evidence audit report. I think I'd highly encourage everybody to go read those findings. There's some really important risks highlighted in our property and evidence process and warehouse. And we received we approved our charter for an independent statement and adopted that for the committee. And other than that, we received our regular report from the city auditor, and I can stand for any questions.
Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to remind you that we passed over the IRG. Thank you, Al. I just want to remind you, you passed over the IRG. Okay, thank you.
And now we're going to the IGR Committee, chaired by with the Vice Chair, Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Intergovernment Relations Committee is bringing forward 1 item for approval. It is the passage of a resolution related to the national recall of Kia and Hyundai models vulnerable to theft.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Rainville. Okay, check. Before I end this meeting, I just want to remind staff if we can make sure to have representatives from each of these committees in case council members have questions. I want to be able to have committee members' questions get answered during this time. That's what we use this committee of the whole meeting for. So next time, if we can make sure that we have people from the Office of Public Service, the Office of Community Safety, that would be super helpful. I also, to note for the clerk, a question that was asked was the home rule charter question by Councilmember Wansley. I just want to note that for the public record so we can make sure to get that question answered. And before I finish, I'll call on Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I just got a text message question from a constituent who wants to know why the contract extensions were in AO and not in PHS. They told me they were watching the PHS meeting, but those where they previously came through and then they went through AO. Is there anyone who can speak to that?
Thank you, Councilmember Vita. From my understanding, when I was in the POGO committee last year, we also approved those contracts in POGO. Okay. Thank you. I don't see any questions before us. So with that, we've concluded all business to come before the committee today. And hearing no objections, I will declare that meeting adjourned. Thank you.